some ponderous thoughts. Scott Adams was talking recently about how effective the placebo effect is. And he was talking about the vaccine, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And it's like, well, the unvaccinated appear to have done quite well for themselves. Like, wasn't worried about COVID, thought it was overblown, knew that the worst that would happen would be that I'd just be laid up for a couple of days. And I'm like, this is just a massive overreaction. This is an opportunity that's been seen by like the globalist powers that be to actually snatch power. And almost like they thought about it, if it's as bad as it could be, if we are not seen to have done something, they kind of fell into a mania. And you could just see it, because there's been similar viruses in my lifetime, and generally what they do was they just lock down the old people and show a measure of kind of decorum around the vulnerable. And we're talking about, when we're talking for COVID, we're talking about the most vulnerable being people who are on death's door, you know, already having all kinds of comorbidities, that a virus that sort of robs you of your appetite as much as anything else and gives you a high fever might just be enough to see you off. If you were you had problems and it was comorbid with diabetes, you're probably dead. Say you know at best your system of let's make it dead simple and say power distribution is already jury rigged. So for them to go in a fever and lose some very important sense there, that'd be enough to kill them. Don't feel hungry no more. Go into a fever. Yeah, if you've got everything else in the world wrong with you, you're going to die as well. But it's like the placebo effect appears to have been far more beneficial than the vaccine was. The placebo effect defense, which to me was like, well, if it brings me down, we're all doomed. The whole world's going to go down, and there's no way of stopping a virus. Especially not one that changes the rules all the time. Especially one that's politically motivated in who it targets. It's like, really? So it's like that great big joke. Those of us who didn't take it seriously and thought it was just an outrageous, overblown reaction to something that really could have been dealt with, and maybe very few of us even become aware of it. They could have dealt with it as a medical thing on the quiet. Just made announcements that this is what they're doing about it. And continued. But no, instead they had to go with killer virus. And it was like the media, they all seized upon it. But the placebo effect be a perfectly adequate defence to it. I did a thing for a laugh at the start of it, seeing how ridiculous it had gone. And I didn't have any takers, but I mean, everybody turned down the chance of a lifetime. I let it be known on Facebook that if you're willing to pay me 100, right, I'll issue you with a magical COVID force field. And it's like, the force field will activate as soon as I get notification from PayPal that the 100's gone in. And if you need proof that you're protected, just print off a copy of the receipt, but keep it in your pocket. Mine worked. Mine worked, didn't die, didn't go anywhere near a hospital, didn't go anywhere near a doctor, didn't need anything really. Stock up on paracetamol and Vimto. My advice. So I'm thinking about this sort of this placebo effect. Say Adams were on about it, talking about the COVID. And I'm like, well, recent times when I've put up videos about Richard Grannon, there was a chap who put me a really thoughtful comment up that was actually critical of both Richard Grannon and Sam Vaknin in that they completely ignore what he would term as alternative forms of medicine that actually they do work for certain people. And it's like what? It's the placebo effect. He wasn't saying it was. He was saying that this kind of stuff works, that Reiki works on people. He was going through the whole list of things that people do that they find beneficial. Helps them find their own way. And he got to the bottom of it. It's like psychology. It's like the psychologist is like just completely ignoring this kind of effect. It's like they're going nowhere. They're selling everyone short. And then I responded to him with, and did you know that the sacraments of Christianity all work as well? That the Catholic ones, like confession, actually works. It's like that's super powerful. A super powerful tool. But that's seen as, it's called a religious sacrament. You've got to actually go through a couple of rites of passage to be able to have access to that service. You have to put a few years in before you can do that. It's like, man on the street has not got the sacrament of confession available to him. It can't be. You have to go back and you have to say, when was the last time you came? You have to be able to say, and then otherwise it's, well, it's my first. Have you been, and then it's like, have you had communion? No. Well, I can't hear your confession until you've had communion. And you'd be sent packing. And you'd have to go to church on Sunday, and then the priest needs to clock you in church, because he can see you, but you can't see him. Priest has to clock you in church, see you there, all penitent, with something on you, carrying the weight of your world on your shoulders, and then you go to the front, you take communion, and once again you're part of the body. Suddenly the body cares about why one of its members isn't working properly. And then you come back the next week and the guy says, so it's your first confession, okay. Have you been baptised? I'm only kidding, you know. But it's like that ritual's powerful. It's like what we talk about now as being the sort of issues people might have with their mental health problems. It's like, what did they call them 100 years ago? Who might you turn to outside of your family when you needed someone to talk to? It would have been the clergy. If you're a Catholic. Go to confession. I've had impure thoughts. Oh, well, you can open the door, can't you? And go and talk to the guy about anything if it's on you. So that sacrament actually works. It's psychologically beneficial, and they have certain rules in the church, in their conditioning as to these imaginary forces out in the world you think have got it in for you. Yes? Well, now you've spoke about them and God's heard you. You'll be alright now. Why? It's like, because Jesus is the best in the world ever at mind games and fucking with people. Leave that magical shit to Jesus and let him sort it out for you. They actually said that, John? Yeah, not in them words though. That's my configuration. Leave that to him. He'll sort it out for you. He's the biggest and baddest of all ghosts. Why? Well, because everyone's heard of him. That silly cow put that curse on John Steele saying you might want to watch your back. When she put that curse on him, implying that her and her friends were somehow psychic and had access to demons and shit, right? She was absolutely flummoxed, finished history when Steele paid me $20 for me to send the Autobots to defend him. What? So yeah, it's like, so she's sending demons against you, is she? Right. Well, her demons are shit because no one's heard of her demons. How about the Autobots? I think it was $20 for the Autobots and Spartacus. Like what? Yeah. So every time you look out the window, you think some like demonic, evil thing might be coming at you, or some possessed fucking crackhead. Just look at them cars there. You don't know. You've got 24-hour surveillance, mate. Don't you worry about it. And it'd just be the silliest and most ridiculous thing anyone ever said to anyone, and it'd be a matter of, well, fucking money changed hands. That was the contract. It's like, beat that with your fucking demons. It's like the variety of games that get played by people who are manipulative. There's people been leaving the odd comment on my videos where I've mentioned this Richard thing. And they're like, you want to watch yourself, you want to be careful, you might get burnt, I'm like, who the fuck do you think you're talking to with your magic? It's like, you might drown. What? So, all the witches appear, and then it's like, oh, I know how to get rid of them. How do you get rid of them, John? You pull imaginary rank on them. And so, I know this game. I am a wise man. Like, your chances of being able to frighten me with your magic words are minimal. But my chances of confounding you and making you go, what? Are infinite. I can just reach for anything. Benefits to my temperament, or let's say character, is that there's something that I'm thinking that right, the placebo effect, there's a way of like living inside it. What? Yes, so you've got a consistent internal never-ending and rewarding energy. It's like you could live in the placebo effect. What? Yeah. It's like we see that it has a great big healing influence, as to whether when you're feeling right with yourself, it's like you don't tend to get sick. Just like, how do you do that, John? It's like, right. You have to submit to the Almighty. What? Yes. You have to accept that there are forces in this world beyond your control that you don't really understand. And you have to admit that you are yourself able to fall victim to them, even though you wouldn't want to. And there are people in the world who are in terrible suffering. And if they could simply think their way out of it, they wouldn't be suffering, would they? And it'd be, you have to act your way out of suffering. It's like, there's vacancies available, right? Working for the same boss as me, doesn't pay nothing. But you can't escape. You've always got to be doing the work. If you fall off the wagon, things go back to where they once were pretty quick. So it's like there's a way of doing it as to where you take it on and we have you do an audit of what you did. Get to the bottom of what you did. which is why videos don't work. I'm saying, you know, your narcissistic teaching videos, people don't learn a damn fucking thing from those. They're okay for knowledge, but they're not good for helping people get over whatever woundedness they're in, because what's been done's been done to them. And it's like, this goes way back. It's like your coaching video doesn't get to give someone the ability to express or tell the story. Be able to put it into language is really important. To understand how you feel, you've got to be able to put it into language. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you've got a mixed emotion about something, and that's why you're in hell. It's good and bad at the same time, and you can't separate the two. And it's like, if you can be given the space to put that into language by someone who understands that that's what you're doing, who's got an idea of what might be wrong with you. You need the feedback. And you need it to be, that where they talk in a clinical sense. Oh, well, this causes this, and causes that, and causes it. No, it's like you have to, the canvas is wrong. And if someone is of the sort of more, as you would say, unprovable, undisprovable ways of operating, so, well, that's the universe they live in. It's like, that's more accessible. Then people are more accessible to help with some, straightforward truth and trying to investigate the story. Help them. I call it putting the blame in the right places. And in doing that, you can get a good idea as to whether this person knows the difference between right and wrong. And then when we get to that, it's like, now you know something. Now we know you know something. So where do you appear on the spectrum of right and wrong? What's your part in your downfall? Things don't just happen. Then, a movie where it was 5 years later. No, that don't happen. So you have to have that chat, because the option is always available so you know the difference between right and wrong, and you've always known the difference between right and wrong, and here you are, broken, asking for help and answers. Well, you've got your fucking answers, haven't you? So you're on the wrong side of this, you're on the wrong side of the Almighty. Take it too far and he'll decide that you have to die to protect the body. It's like God will be your, as was correctly stated by Metallica, a source of self-destruction. Like God drives those mad he means to destroy. It's like that God. It's like, in submitting to, maybe, I am being punished. And maybe I deserve it. Or maybe me not really understanding how much trouble I got myself into and not realising or working out when it started. It's like I can't find the wound to seal it. To even see how bad it is. Funny old thing, my channel and my audience, I'm at 3.5k subs, and I've been at 3.5k subs for between 2.5 and 3.5k subs for over a decade, right? And my audience, right, when they used to find me videos, when I used to do stuff on this, talking about it like this, it's like you get them, and you get someone who left comments on 4 or 5, and the first one he'd comment once saying bollocks, and he'd have just been a minute into it and think, who's this fucking crazy bastard? And then you get it more and more and more. Next thing you know, someone's watched 10 of them, And then I'd have a message in my email or else Facebook as to say, can I book some time to have a word with you? And I'd be like, well, yeah, absolutely. And they'd have already, the process of thinking that gets them to the place as to where they can, what it ends is confess, we have a good honest chat. I got no reason to have anything against these people, and if you pay me, I'll listen to you. I got no reason in the world not to be honest with you. I've got no reason in the world to have a bias. I just will let yourself snitch yourself. I'll let yourself snitch. I'll listen to you. Oftentimes, I've had people come to me and we've had a chat and we've ended up talking where it'll be like a 2-brew call, 4 hours. I talk to someone for 4 hours and we'd have a very long conversation. First thing usually somewhere in that conversation, the worldview gets destroyed. Any external things that give them grief get altered. Markedly sometimes. And then we have the long chat and we get to the bottom of, does this person know the difference between right and wrong? And when they know, the source of shame. You just have to get them to find it. See, I've done, usually, right, the pattern is, I'll talk to somebody for that long, they'll go away, and then the next time they get hit with, an emotional flashback where something reminds them of a sadistic ex-girlfriend or else an ex-wife, and they suddenly get that, and just for a minute they fall back in love with her again. I miss her so much. So they get this high from the emotional flashback, which then crashes and turns into the beginning of a depression. And this is the cycle. This is the problem they've got. This is what's fucking with their life. So I put it in them that next time that happens, just give us a call. Don't mess with anything else. Just give us a call. So I'll charge you. Give us a call. Why? Because there are opportunities to learn some more. So like if we can talk about this flashback process while it's fresh in your head and all the memories have come flooding back, I can remind you of what you told me before when you weren't now feeling like there'd been a letdown because you had that emotional high. So I'll remind you what you told me before, and then it'd be a matter of, oh fucking hell, yeah, I've gone into psychosis. I mean, you're like, come back. Remember this. So I do the 4-hour talk, and then I do probably an hour talk when something like that happens. And then I never hear from them ever having another problem with it. Why? I give them the tools to sort it out for themselves. And in having shared that last flashback, you create a fanciful association between like me and the flashback. So the next time that happens and they get that rush of adrenaline and dopamine and PTSD, something reminds you of, they remember me too. And that, well, this ain't real, is it? But this is another opportunity to learn. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get upset about it. But this is an opportunity to learn. Every time this happens, you get a bit stronger. So it's like, I'm not getting paid no more. And like, lessons I've taught people are often the world of, in most cases, found their own way. It's like they've got a different set of problems now. Not the broken heart, not the despair. Gone. We've dealt with that. I have converted quite a few atheists. And that isn't hard to do, really. When they're in pain and they've really nowhere to go, yeah, it's like that soon falls away. It's like, hang on a minute, there's something to this. It's like, not the God-bothering thing, I mean, the spirit. The spirit's real. It's like the church is like a perversion of the spirit. So the spirit's real. It's like we can recognise that the spirit is real, can't we? Yes, we can. So it's like, you go to some guy and he talks psychology and your problems are more relatable as being dramas, stories. And it's like, there's a framework there. It's like, we understand people's patterns of behaviours, but then it's like, the pattern of behaviour thing only takes you so far. I've been trying to get to it for a long time as to where I realised I'd fucked it up a few years ago. Stopped just saying, well, let's make a video about narcissism. No. I make videos about sadism, don't I? I'll say there's some really fucking bad people in the world. And to call them narcissists is to almost take accountability away. It's almost to stick a label on them that says somehow they aren't quite in control. Right? Most narcissists you find are fucking boring. Boring. And no threat to anyone. They ain't got the guts to do anything. Cowards. If you give them power, they tend to exploit it. If they don't have power, they cooperate. Met good workers. As long as you keep them down. Give them no power. They'll find different games to play. But sadists, calculating people who will just say things to deliberately wind you up because they know what pushes your buttons, they're a problem. They're a major problem. They're what are really fucking the world up. I mean, there's exploiting power because it's your nature. And then there's enjoying fucking with people. Torturing them. Sadists, yeah. People whose own personal need is so overpowering for the juice. What they get from being worshipped, what they get from hurting people. Fuck them. The deep glee and delight of the sadist who's a calculating piece of work. Don't talk about them so much. It's like I've been trying to put it to people as high as fucking Peterson, Shapiro, right? They're virtue signaling like fuck and they've got a problem. It's like the tail wags the dog for about 3 hours of the day, on average, I'd say, for those guys. And it's what? It's like, yeah, you've got some sadistic fucking assholes who deliberately come up with ridiculous stories of things they intend to do. and put into law and things to deliberately gaslight you guys. That's the game. Let's fuck with them deliberately. We know. Well, we'll do a brainstorming session. What pisses these guys off? Stories of child grooming. Okay, yeah, we'll have some child grooming. Trafficking. Yeah, let's have some trafficking. Torture. False imprisonment. Yeah, we'll have some more. It's like there are those who think that certain, people like that, they're like, nah, there's no one like that. It's like, well, I've come across a few of them in my time, and it's like, that ain't pleasant. Willing to tell any lie to get you in trouble. Because, hey, that'll get you in trouble. You can't ever go against it. Someone's willing to tell any lie and play a power game and a popularity contest and be virtue signalling. You can't fight against that. No one can. It's ruthful. It's ruthless. It's ruthless. It's not clever, but eventually you might provoke a reaction that might see the person you're trying to attack or hurt. You see them take their own life. I think that is the jackpot. So that don't get addressed. I've spoken of it in the past on my channel. I don't know if but it might be it'd still be up on Odyssey. I've talked about it. It's like, how do you win? How do you win an online spat? How do you win an online feud? These days we see it go to court, right? But more commonly, it ends with one of them taking their own life, and it happened more often than people like to admit. They'll say, you'll read it in the paper, man found dead in house, no suspicious circumstances. Well, he killed himself. Maybe they're not straight on his computer breaking his fucking passwords to find out who'd been fucking with him. Ever. Never. They're not bothered about that. So a lot of murders in the world look like suicides. One way or another. So how do you win an online spat? How do you win an online fight? How do you win an online blood feud? Well, one has to immolate themselves somehow. How else do you turn it off? See, I put it to it's like Vaknin and Grannon are both flawed characters, and for my own reasons, I've got an opinion on both of them. I've got personally no animosity towards Sam Vaknin. All he ever did was like just fuck me off. I'm like, all right, okay. I'm okay. I could have respect to leave you alone. It's like that's the thing I do with people. If I admire them and respect them, I tend to leave them alone. But I sent him a message one day where I was faced with a very difficult dilemma, which I already knew the answer to really, but I just wanted maybe just the right, yeah, you're doing the right thing. Because it was just, I'm in a crisis and it blocked. Over a decade ago. I knew what I was doing with dangerous people and still ended up in trouble. I knew what I was doing and I ended up in trouble. I learned a hell of a lot from it about, just how weak I was to certain kinds of, let's say, manipulation. But so Richard knows better than what he does. The trick is they want to earn, they work hard. They want to earn, but there's no one willing to give them money for grants and research. Because they're not doing anything about climate change and they're not addressing the woke thing. They're playing the same game with labels as the woke thing. As it codes, as it goes out to a suggestible audience. Just a different label that's been thrown out. That's a side thing that, when the narcissists become a pejorative. Well, it's a big tent. So when narcissist becomes a pejorative, it's just like calling someone racist, isn't it? It's the same thing. And it'd be right too. Be a better word. Because I've never met someone who was truly racist who wasn't a narcissist. That ability to collectivise and project hatred on a group is very much of the imagination, that shit. It's like racism comes from having like a internalized hatred that you selectively administer to the imagined foe. So there isn't any, to my mind, there's not a racist in the world who isn't also a narcissist. But when it becomes as to where, stick the label on, stick the label on, stick the label on, I'd say being a narcissist is not the end of the world, because those who've been raised in poverty and servitude, they have to be narcissists. They get like smashed into being one. What's that? They have to live a double life that lends itself to that. Why? Well, you have to play by the rules in one set of rules in one place, and then you have to play by another set of rules in another place, and then you have to play by a different set of rules in another place. You have to read the room, and you have to constantly adjust who you're playing today. And this is societally sort of enforced by pressure, and to be oneself at all times, right? Which is what I do, right? Is to take an incredible risk all the time. Why? Because anyone can give themselves the right to punish you for not going with the room. It's like there's a herd mentality. You'll hear it said a lot, but it's real, and it's not so simple. It's subtle. But if you recognise that you're a different person when you're around your friends than when you're at work. You're a different person when you're around your parents than when you're at work. You're a different guy in the pub than when you're at work. It's like, does anyone see where that starts to become a problem? You're compartmentalizing yourself. You're breaking yourself down into pieces. And I came to a conclusion a few years ago that I could no longer hold it up. I could no longer respect people who demanded respect but hadn't done anything to earn it, or ought to be, sometimes, kicked to death. No. Not doing it anymore. And in being like that, it's like the only defense I've got is to be fair and honest and a straight shooter, where I can basically measure everyone else by my conduct. What? Yeah, when I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. When I say I'm going to turn up somewhere, I'll turn up. So act in good faith all the time. Make it your own private joke between you and the world. As I say, the world thinks I'm an outcast, but I'm the only one who's acted in good faith. So I'm right and everyone else is wrong. Why? Because I'm acting in good faith. I'm expecting others to do the same, and when they don't, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So then I'm like, okay, so when you say one thing, you mean some. Thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for that. Thank you for allowing me acting in good faith be a passive way of finding out what I need to know about you. It's like treating someone with respect as a test. So it's like I'm like my position's like humanity as a whole has like perverted itself and is like works miles away from its what might have been seen as its kind of parameters, safe parameters. Runs like well past it. It's like humans now go through more sort of emotional wear and tear. Than probably any generation that came before. If you look at it, you know, across the board, of course, people have always suffered. People always get fucking killed in bad ways, tortured, starved. Starved's probably the worst. You know, people who died got off lucky, didn't they? Well, everyone died in the end, but when it was quick, it's like they kind of got off lucky in some certain circumstances of the way that people have had to live in the past. Such suffering still exists in the world. And we will never be rid of it. But it's this just broadcast the narcissist. Well, they've all got the same pattern of behaviour. Okay, we'll apply that to every single one of them. It's like, well, that one, right, he's got other issues other than his narcissism. It's like, well, what is it? He's an obsessive collector of model railways and he goes into debt for it. Works overtime. It's like he's got a great big fucking setup in his house for his train sets. And it's cost him thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds, but it's like roof's fucking leaking. And the place is in disrepair and actually there's better examples than someone like that. There's the guy who loses his wife and kids because he won't get off his fucking computer. There's I've known a good few of them. They will get into a game like one of the MMORPGs, the old Star Wars Galaxies, World of Warcraft, and then it'd be one day you hear they're always playing on their game and at work, or if they don't work, they're just always on the computer playing the game. And next thing you know, wife and kids are gone. And it's not as if by magic. It's like it's quite obvious that you've made it so someone believes you care more about your fucking online game than you do your family. It's not true, but they decide it is and leave. 4 guys I know that's happened to. It's like, there's a friend of mine who was, he'd been on the sick for a long time. He got run over, got injured. So he's not a malingerer, he's someone who was like had a lot of operations to fix this badly broken leg he had. And so he was kind of semi-disabled. And he got into playing games, and he ends up playing games with me, who's a single bloke. It doesn't matter, I've got no one to piss off. So he plays games with me, and a big crowd of other people. And we've got Americans and Canadians, and so you're up till 5 o'clock in the morning playing games with these guys. And his wife used to go out to work every day, and he used to do the getting the kids up for school and picking them up from school shift. And then he got wind that his wife was cheating on him. And when, when she's come back and she's just thrown it in his face, you spend 80 hours 80 hours a week on that fucking video game. And he's like, well, I made you an account, you can play as well. You're not married to her no more. You can play as well, I've sorted it all out for you. See, that lad, in his idea, right, he was, we can play this game together. And she's like, that sounds like a good idea. And you don't usually find women like that who are so much into gaming. Some are, but they're a rare species. So, when he gets something for his, for himself in this game, or he earns something, he always puts something aside for wife. So he's got a good suit of armour, and then he's got a good suit of armour for wife, and then he's got a good rifle, and he's got a good rifle for wife. So he's saying to his missus, he's not talking to her no more, and he's saying to her, look at this T21 rifle I got you, and thinking that he'd done her a favour. You see, the narcissism thing, right? There's a thing being said about, say, narcissism borderline. It's a bit neurotic, you can't always tell the difference between what's real and imagined. It's like, you'll get it as to where there's some people, and this is a big problem in the world, where people prefer the in-game universes, places to live, than their lives. They would rather be playing X game than anything else, because that's home. That's where they're valuable, that's where they're important, that's where they're strong, that's where they make decisions, that's where they have choices, that's where they have agency. On the internet, in the games. It's like, that guy, those guys, they don't really even know they've got dysfunctions. Issues. They don't know they've got issues because they're doing what they want to do. The level of crisis that we're eventually going to face as the world turns, as things that we've not experienced yet become more likely, like disruptions to the power grid that last for weeks and months and things like that. It's like, when those guys awake, I don't know what the fucking world looks like. Couldn't tell you. I tell you, all of the sort of coaching, narcissism, knowledge, learn how, self-help, it's not going to be very useful when push comes to shove and you've got fucking screaming lunatics in your face. It's all for naught. I think the topic of, narcissism, right? back when, 13 years ago or so, it's that long, isn't it now? Not 10 years, 9 years. Someone like me, right, the topic of narcissism, right, it needed to be addressed, and like one video ever be made about it, like a feature film, like something that's like a documentary film that gives people the facts about what's going on and how people are turning out now and how things have changed, and not politicize it. I was thinking that if we can just make one thing, make one documentary, so it's the documentary that's like the Enron documentary. If we can just do one, then we don't need to do any more. If someone writes one really good book about it, or two really good books, that's enough. But instead, it's been kind of turned into a kind of a little hug box. Now, the hug box works if the guys running the hug box are hugging, are actually being sources of sympathy for the victims and the like. You can maintain this hug box of just recycling the same things over and over and over again, right? And people will find comfort in essence, knowing that it wasn't their fault, that everything turned to shit, because somebody else fucked it up for them. And then get that restated and restated and restated and restated. And they're not a victim until the next person comes along and fucking uses them. Or they get to where they become the smarty pants who then starts to see narcissists everywhere and destroys their own bridge to the fucking world. Because what you really need is a sense of humour. You need to be able to say, oh, aye, like that, when someone tells you something doubtful. That's what you need. Oh, aye. Oh, really? That's what you need. You need to be able to say, really? And risk getting a slap for it. Because most of the time you don't. It's like, I don't think that works. You can't broadcast remedies for misery because everyone lives in their own version of fucking hell. What you can do is go and find out about their version of hell and work out why, in what way similar is their version of hell to my version of hell. And it's like, well, I learned how to escape from my version of hell. I wonder if you could follow the same path as I did, or maybe one of your own. Because this is something that has to be, this is something that's in the mind. It's of the mind. It's in the imagined space. It is accessible like that. Two-way communication. The broadcast does not work. If the broadcast was able to do meaningful, really meaningful shit, by way of transformative shit, not just telling people what they want to hear and making them laugh, transformative shit, it'd have already been done by smarter guys than us. Seriously. We'll go watch a Stanley Kubrick movie. It's like putting people in boxes isn't helping anyone. Because everyone's suddenly a secret narcissist. It turns out you're a shyster and you pull the rug. Oh my God, one of those covert narcissists. It's like, no, he was always a prick. It's like, he just tricked you and pulled the rug. He tricked you. He didn't trick other people. He tricked you. So everyone's a secret narcissist. Everyone pulls the rug. It's like, no. It's like there are players who are beyond the concept of what they're... The narcissism thing, it's the magical thinking and the terrible situational decision making and the hate and the spitefulness that makes them a fucking problem. But then you get those beyond them who are sadistic and they just know what hurts, they know what really hurts. And that's what they do to people. They work out to the best way they can hurt someone in a very, what's the word? Customised, bespoke way. Find the one person's weakest point and hit there. Like, it makes me question everything that whole fucking community have ever put out into the world. Because I tell you for what, you know, none of you for confronting people who are just absolute fucking cunts. No one in that self-help narcissist space ever comes out against anyone except actually people who they can't jive with, who don't compute because they're too small-minded to understand someone could be so different from them. I mean, the likes of your Peterson, who's really done his best not to turn it into a grift. Really done his best not to turn it into a grift, and he's going the right way about it by, you know, becoming a public intellectual and someone who has conversations, which is what you guys should have morphed into. If you're so fucking electrically brilliant on the nature of the enemy, the nature of evil, it's like, why don't you ever fucking confront it? Well, it looks like you've both chosen to do it now because you've gone at each other. It's like, I'm saying this, right? I'm getting this off my chest about this whole gang. Someone left a comment earlier on, and they're like, I'm afraid to mouth off about this. Someone who's got problems with, like, what they call emotional dysregulation. And then it's like, you've got emotional dysregulation, right? It's like, go and find people who are kind and won't kill you, and just learn how to behave around better people and just do your best to be polite. Go and suss out a pub or something, right, where most of the people who go in there are civilised, right, and go and hang out in there. Don't want to be going making friends with people, just go and hang out in there and just observe. If you're socially awkward, you need to address it. So what you need to do is you need to find a relatively safe public place where that might be allowed to happen. Head out on a sunny day to one of them family-orientated pubs where everyone's sat with the kids. Go to a place like that where most of the people are in the 50s. And address it. Social awkwardness stuff, emotional dysregulation. It's like, you got to face it. So you got to find the gentlest place to face it, because your social anxieties, they'll become a super problem the day someone gets really in your face, and whether they come from, like, the cops knocking on your door. That's how people get themselves in super trouble, when they can't handle themselves like that. When something serious comes to the door that needs to be dealt with and you make an absolute fuck of it, that's the reason why you need to socialise yourself, make an effort. But it's like, you got a person here who's one of these, who's afraid of what other people might think about them that they don't even know, right? That's a big thing for people who are shut in, trying to self-help their way out of crisis. And someone come along saying, I'm frightened to say what I think on the subject of this Grannon thing, right? Because of all the nasty comments, and it's like basically within the group of our friend, people who've got Richard's imaginary friends, those who are the actually vulnerable people that are in his audience, who look to him for guidance, guidance, a bit of leadership even, afraid to speak for being attacked on the internet by his fans, or his stans, as they call them now. So, if you're running that, right, if that's your thing, if you're running that sort of imagined internet community, remote but together, united in one interest, field, right? When people who are members of it feel as though they're silenced, feel or are afraid of a repercussion of saying what they think, you've built a cult. And it's not real. And it's doomed. If that vindictive behaviour towards Vaknin hasn't taught them a thing or two, I don't know what ever will. It might be strange in that those who think that he was a healer and a good guy, and right, maybe he's providing you a lesson that you needed to learn about who you think people are. Who you look up to. Might have been the most meaningful piece of therapy he's given to everyone watching. It's like, hey, this guy can be really vindictive, can't he? Really vindictive. And go for the old institutional, go for the old, the enemy, the weapons of the state apparatus, or the weapons of YouTube or Twitter, and use those weapons. And it's like, and that's so typical of what the bad guys do. Is maybe the angle is going to come. Like, he's taking Sam out because he's an expert. I'm going to show everyone how to ruin one of these charlatans before your very eyes and call myself a hero, and then possibly once Sam has, if Sam breaks and kind of shows his ass, right, Richard then be able to tell a story of how he destroyed some monster and exposed some dangerous person. So, Grannon moves up an echelon or two in the standings of who's who and who's getting attention out in the world of the media. And one of his new friends comes along and says, "Hey Richard, what's this here? I hear about this feud you're having with..." No one's asking Sam, are they? But I think they'll probably ask Richard, because he's like, he wants some attention. He wants to be out there. And you'll hear some story about how he's exposed some charlatan and accused Sam of everything that he's himself guilty of. And I was like, this is just nailed on, isn't it? It's like just pathological. It's like Richard is giving his followers the best lesson they've ever had from him. It's like you have pissed on your chips. You've destroyed your own grift. You've lost your way of trying to help when you got on the money train. Because unfortunately, it's like in this, if you're trying to help, right, there's no money in it. Don't expect to be getting paid. It's like, you're at square one. How do I monetize this that I know that others don't? You're back at square one. It's like you've made as much money as you can out of it. And to try and scale it, nah, you're never going to make it. You're never going to make anything other than a reasonable good living. But you're going to have to work. And it's like the actual work of psychology, right, that you could be paid big money for would be for you to hear people's worst stories and have to deal with it. Well, you get some guy who'll spill his guts of his 40 years of abuse, or even a confession of all the fucking terrible things he's done, and deal with it. And it's like, Richard ain't got that. That's where you make money, doing the hard jobs, the really hard jobs. And it's like, if you were a psychologist, like I said myself, I was like, I do some. And it's like, all my goal ever was to become so proficient that you don't need to make money on YouTube videos. You don't even need to have more than 300 views, 400 views. If you can be good enough at the actual counselling and clinician and advice and listening and using your common sense and using your judgment and being fair, right, with people, that if that become a useful service, that you charge handsomely for it. Like, charge handsomely for it, because it's hard. It's not everyone can do it. It's talent. And it's like, something like that, you would, if you were doing that, you'd want to do at the very maximum about 16, 20 hours a week of actual consultation. That's a lot, isn't it? But that's as much as you should be able to do. 20 hours. A 20-hour week, but it's like, no, this is 20 hours of reliving a lot of shit. It's like, can you do that, John? Like, yeah, I can. Yeah, as long as you pay me. So that's all the business is. It's not scalable. You can't broadcast it. You might be able to give some people a few snippets of wisdom or advice, but you're not going to be able to come up with anything that's going to help them, because they're there. You don't know who they are. They're only there under the camera. They're strangers to you. To think you can, like, make a meaningful difference to a stranger just by him watching your video, it's like, come on. Fanciful. But I really don't see how much more money there is to be made on self-help, narcissism awareness, and it's like, Richard wrote a book it's called A Cult of One: How to Deprogram Yourself from Narcissistic Abuse. It's like, I'm tempted to read it. Why, John? Because that's impossible. I need to find out how you go about doing that. And I personally think I'll get to the book and it's like, that's just a tagline. It doesn't actually say, here's the bit you need to know about how to deprogram. Deprogram? It's like, your training in the big grift is incomplete, sir. you should have stuck around for the next lesson.